Hello and welcome to the Longbox Review Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Eric. Today's episode is the start of a series of things that I've been wanting to do for a while, and considering that 2023 is my 45th anniversary of reading and collecting comics, I thought I'd start this series. I actually did this comics history, my comics history. I started back in 2010 on the blog, examining these very comics that I'm going to be talking about throughout my comics history. But I thought I would bring it to the podcast and start doing these. I'm a little behind. I was supposed to have released this episode in September of 2023, so I have a little bit of catching up to do. Regardless, I'm very excited about getting into this and talking about comics that are very important to me in some way, or they were important to me in some way, and just talking about some older comics that people may not be aware of or as familiar with. And I've certainly over 45 years in the case of these comics I'm going to be talking about. I haven't read some of these ever since then, 45 years ago. So it's going to be fun for me to go back and examine these issues, and maybe I'll discover that they don't quite hold up. But you know what? That's the nature of enjoying any kind of hobby. But I'm looking forward to the journey. So basically, I have already talked about the three comics that I consider my start in this wonderful hobby of mine. And those were Avengers 177, Amazing Spider-Man 186, and Marvel Tales 98. And like I said, I've already talked about those. I discussed them in episode 194, Comic Book Memories. There's also the Secret Origin blog post from October of 2009. So shortly after I started the blog, I talked about those particular issues pretty much in depth. So I'm not going to be talking about those three. So if you're interested in hearing me discuss those, or even reading about what I said about those, you can go listen to episode 194 or go visit that Secret Origin post. So, but what I did talk about briefly in those two areas was that it was late 1978, and turns out it's probably
late September. It could have even been early October when I got those comics. The way that comic books were on magazine racks at that time, you could find issues from months before. Just depended on how well the magazine vendor person, went through and replaced those comic books. Anyway, but regardless of the actual time frame, these comics were on sale in September 1978. And I'm going by the on sale dates of Mike's Amazing World of Comics. And I've talked about that site before. I wrote about it a little bit in that Secret Origin blog post as well. And so I'm going by those dates, regardless of whether they're correct or not. This is the information I have. So, like I said, those three Marvel comics that I started with. So Avengers actually was published in August of 78, but I didn't get it until, like I said, it was either late September or early October. And I say late September because Amazing Spider-Man 186 came out on September 12th, and Marvel Tales 98 on the 19th of September. So that's why I think it was actually late September that I got these, and that started my 45-year-long journey. 45 years so far. So what else came out that month that I got? Well, there were two more issues. Oh, wait, and this is actually the reason why it was probably early October now that I'm looking at it. So anyway, the first up is Spider-Woman, Volume 1, Number 9, which came out September 12th. And then Green Lantern, Volume 2, 111, which came out September 28th. And that's why I'm saying it was probably early October. But because these comics, again, since they came out in September, I'm starting with comics that came out in September 1978. As far as Spider-Woman, I'm sure I bought this issue because of my interest in Spider-Man, evidenced by 2 of the 3 first comics that I bought were Spider-Man issues. Plus, they had just aired earlier that year the first season of the Spider-Man live-action TV show, which I remember watching specifically. And so this was my introduction to Jessica Drew, and I will get into more details in a little bit. For Green Lantern, I'm not entirely sure why I bought this, other than perhaps I was familiar with Green Lantern from the Super Friends cartoon. Like many people of my age group, comic books may not have been our first introduction to superheroes. It would, it was probably the cartoons that we watched, and that was certainly true in my case. However, this was Green Lantern 111 was my first DC comic that I had gotten into. So, 4 of the 5 that I bought that came out in September were Marvel. Anyway, so first DC comic, Green Lantern. I don't know why I didn't follow Green Lantern comics more after this, because with a one exception, which we'll get into next month. I did not. Green Lantern was something that I came back to much later. So that's going to be interesting to kind of chart my comics history in terms of what I did buy. Why did I buy them? Why did I not keep up on this stuff? Well, and part of that I can answer right now, which is easy because you weren't always guaranteed to find the next issue in the run when you bought stuff in my case, like a convenience store, a grocery store, or whatever. So it wasn't until the advent, obviously, of direct sale comic book shops that it was easier for many of us, not everybody, of course, but in my case, it was pretty much you got what you got, and if you missed some issues, that's what happened. So anyway. All right. So some of the other things that I'm going to do in these particular episodes, talk about a little bit about some of the other comics that came out in September 1978 that I purchased later, and in some cases decades later, such as this issue of Flash, number 268, that came out on September 14th. I just bought, at the time of this recording, I just bought this issue within the last month. And it was because I was doing research for this episode, and I'm scanning all of the cover images on Mike's Amazing World of Comics, and I see this Flash issue 268 that has Alan Scott, Green Lantern, on the cover. And so I wanted to buy some back issues for something else that I plan to do, or at least just to read, and I wanted to just add some more comics if I could. Just to help defray the shipping cost. So anyway, I got this because Alan Scott's on the cover, but I had no recollection of ever seeing this issue on the shelf. So, it's just one of those ones that just got away from me. I may cover this issue in a future episode because flipping through it, there's a comic book connection to this. So I think that might be interesting to talk about. So we shall see. The other comic that came out this month that I got later was Detective Comics 481, came out the same day as Green Lantern 111, September 28th, as did the next one that I'll talk about here in a second. But as far as Detective Comics, I think I bought this at a local comic shop in the early 80s. My favorite story in it has to do with Robin trying on 3 new costumes that were suggested by fans while on an adventure fighting a character called the Raven. I did blog about this particular thing, mostly to talk about the Robin's costumes throughout the years. And I'll have a link in the show notes for that blog post if you're interested. It's actually one of the ones that gets a lot of traffic over time. And then finally, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes number 246. I have the issue because I have all of this run of Legion in Superboy comics, but I have yet to read it. So I keep, I do a regular Legion of Superheroes podcast with Peter Rios, and I talk about how much I love the Legion of Superheroes, but there's so much Legion history, so many Legion comics I've not read. Anyway, those are the comics that I purchased later. Some notable comics that came out in September 1978. The first one it is a comic book, but it's also a book on record. It is the Peter Pan book and record set BR-520 featuring 2 Superman tales, Mxyzptlk Up, Menace, and Alien Creatures. I probably got this as a birthday or Christmas present later that year from my parents, and I listened the crap out of that and I think I actually still have that record. I should pull out my record player and put that on. And you may have noted that I said Mxyzptlk because that's how they pronounced it in that record. And so for years after I listened to this record, that's how I pronounced that name. And it was only, I don't know, many, many, many years later that I would hear it pronounced, I think, in the way that it is supposed to be pronounced, which is and forgive me if I get this wrong, but Mxyzptlk. So anyway, there's that. And then Justice League of America 161. This is the one where Zatanna, who's on the cover, is refusing membership. And everybody, all the Justice League members in the background are just in shock that she would refuse to join their illustrious team. I've never read that issue, but I certainly want to. And then finally, especially these days, at the time of this recording, the Micronauts Marvel Omnibus is I think, forthcoming shortly. And anyway, Micronauts #1 came out in September 1978 as well. Never read it. Actually don't have too much of an interest in it. However, because of the upcoming release of this and just the general interest of late Bronze Age comic books from some segment of the podcast community, comic book podcast community, it's been in the zeitgeist, so I wanted to mention it. Plus, Comic Geek Speak did recently release, at the time of this recording, recently released an episode talking about the first 12 issues of Micronauts, and they mentioned that there was a reprint series, a Marvel special edition. I think it was a 5 or 6 issue reprint series covering those first 12 issues, I believe. And I may actually get those just to see what the hubbub is about regarding the Micronauts. But I don't really have a desire to get the omnibus. So anyway, all right. Now for the main event. I'll be talking about Spider-Woman #9 and Green Lantern 111. And Spider-Woman #9 is by Carmine Infantino and Al Gordon as artists, Mark Grunwald, writer, Karen Rains as colorist, James Novak, letterer, and Roger Stern as editor, with a cover by Infantino and Bob Wiacek, which is probably the reason, I mean, other than what I stated before about an interest in Spider-Man. Well, here's a Spider-Woman character, so you know, what's she about? I got to find out. But that cover was really cool because it features a kind of a side view of Spider-Woman. She is sort of up against a wall, like she's sticking to a wall, but that's not, I found out later, she doesn't actually stick to walls, I don't think, back then anyway. And then there's the villain of the story, the Needle, with his single eye glaring at her. Literally, this power is coming out of his eye towards Spider-Woman. So that was a really cool image. So I got it. The story is called Eye of the Needle. And the synopsis I'm about to read is from the Marvel Database Wiki, with a few slight changes because I didn't like the way it was worded. I'm professionally an editor and I can't remove myself from that. Anyway, after a night out with Jerry Hunt, Jessica Drew refuses to let him drive her home, opting instead to glide home as Spider-Woman. Jerry, left alone in his thoughts, overhears a scream and goes to the person's aid. There he comes face to face with a costume being that we will come to know as the Needle. Pulling a gun on the Needle, Jerry soon finds himself paralyzed when the Needle makes eye contact, and he is helpless when the Needle stitches his mouth shut. Yes, creepy. And then the Needle flees. The next day, Jessica is informed by Priscilla Dolly, her landlady, that Jerry is in the hospital. When Jessica rushes there, she learns about what happened. In spite of Jerry's protests, she decides to go out and investigate as Spider-Woman. Why would she not? Though she doesn't find the Needle, she does discover another of his victims, again with mouth sewn shut. The next day, Jerry is released from the hospital, and he gives Jessica flack for going out after the Needle alone. Both agree to tackle him together. That night, as the Needle prepares to make his next nightly appearance, He reflects how he was just a mild-mannered elderly tailor until he was beaten senseless by thugs. In the hospital, he developed an ability to stun others with his one good eye, and upon his release from the hospital, he took on the guise of the Needle to get revenge on the kind of people who made him a victim. When he strikes again, Jerry and Spider-Woman are there to stop him. When Jerry is stunned, Spider-Woman steps in to stop the Needle. During the fight, she too is stunned by the Needle's gaze. However, Jessica manages to snap out of it just before the Needle has a chance to stitch her mouth shut. She then easily defeats the Needle by knocking him out with her Venom Blast. When the police arrive, Spider-Woman flees the scene. Later, back in her civilian guise, she watches with Jerry as the Needle is taken into police custody. I wish I could remember what I thought of this issue the first time I read it. I have a vague recollection it made such an impression on me because of the creepiness of the Needle and what he did to people. So much so that I kept it in my collection for a couple decades. I did end up discarding it at some point, probably in the early 90s, because it was the only issue of Spider-Woman I had. But somewhere around 2015, 2016, I was thinking about it. In fact, there was a time where I bought a bunch of back issues of like this, where I was like, I remember having this in my collection. I don't have it anymore. Why don't I have this? And so I went back, and this is one of the ones I bought. I bought another copy of, because of that impression that it had on me all those decades later. In large part to the Needle, and that just that, like I said, the creepiness of what he did to people, being paralyzed while someone violates you, as the Needle does in that story, is just kind of it's scary. And, it really gets into like the primal fear of being helpless. And it's just like, just thinking about it, just, ugh, it makes me feel that way. But, despite the fact that it is kind of silly, the guy gets beaten up, but he develops this power to stun people. And then he goes and sews their mouths shut instead of beating them senseless. I don't understand it. I'll get into that a little bit later too, but yeah, it's still silly. So anyway, 45 years later, I read this again, and this time, not story-wise, but I'm really appreciating the art. I was never a fan of Infantino's later Flash run. I found his style to be a bit too loose and sketchy, but this, with Gordon's expressive inking, really thick lines and contours and stuff, I just thought it was gorgeous. The art generally is fluid and dynamic and moody. That's the thing I love about this. This really benefited from a moody feeling, especially during the night scenes. The one thing I do not like about this issue is Jerry Hunt, Jessica's boyfriend. He's whiny and macho and self-centered. I actually want to read more issues of this volume just to see Jessica toss him out with the trash, because this guy he's so chauvinistic. I do not like him. I also thought it odd how twice in the issue, on subsequent pages, supporting characters, just minor people in the background or whatever, or in the scene, I should say, would see Jessica, not Spider-Woman, see Jessica and have an unfavorable reaction to her. One of them thought, "What a strange chick, pretty, but she gives me the creeps." And so it made me wonder, was this a thing in the series to accentuate Jessica's otherness? I don't recall that aspect of her character in later appearances that I read, because I did start collecting other issues of Spider-Woman. Although, to be fair, I guess the cover does have the tagline, "To know her is to fear her." So I think that's what they were playing up. Speaking of, it's because of this issue and how much it stood out with me that I kept, as I said, an eye on the character. I bought the Volume 4 run by Bendis and Malev, which I'm still bitter about in the way that it ended abruptly. And one of these, I've always planned to cover that volume and talk about that aspect. I did start to get some issues of Volume 5 by Hopeless Land and Rodriguez, and I wish I had continued to read more of this series once Javier Rodriguez came on as artist, because I love his work. So I may have to revisit that sooner rather than later. And then there was also the origin mini-series by Reed and Luna. And plus, I mentioned her on the cover of this issue. Spider-Woman, as shown in this series, has one of the best superhero costumes ever. I think, just that red and yellow with the emblem, basically, kind of evoking a Black Widow spider, but she's not Black Widow, right? They already have one of those. So, but I just love it. I think it's one of the best costumes. I checked out this issue on the Marvel Unlimited app as well, because when I have that opportunity, I'd like to see, are there any differences? How does the art look? How's the coloring look comparatively? And discovered that they included the letters page. So I went to a future issue, which was 13, and found these reactions to issue 9. So David was also impressed by the needle. David said, "You're giving me a severe case of the creeps." There's, again, that word. I've used it many times, and so did the people back then. Danny, however, was not impressed, calling the needle, quote, "straight out of an electric company skit." Ooh, ouch, Danny. I don't agree with that, but okay. Brian thought not revealing why the needle sewed mouth shut was weird, but, quote, "eerie fun for us." He also wasn't a fan of Jerry Hunt's. So yeah, team anti-Jerry Hunt, Brian. Let's go. Barbara did not care for Gordon's inks, interestingly enough, criticizing his work as tracing Infantino's pencils. Agree to disagree. A different David in the letter column declared, "Welcome to comics, Mr. Grunwald. You seem to be the fresh new blood everyone is waiting for." So Spider-Woman was Grunwald's first writing gig at Marvel. Of course, he would later helm a decade of Captain America stories, nearly 60 issues of Quasar, and my favorite of his works, and apparently his favorite, the 12-issue Squadron Supreme series, which I love. And that's on my list. Eventually, I'm going to talk about that. All right. Besides all that, one of the neat things about taking a look at these older comic books are, some of the ads in them. And so I wanted to get into those a little bit. The inside cover has an ad from Remco's amazing Energized Spider-Man. It was a 13.5-inch tall doll that could pull itself up a line and power a Spider-Copter. I wanted one of these so badly. I saw that ad in so many comics, but I think I only ever saw one on TV commercials once or twice or whatever, besides the comics. So anyway, in the middle of the book was the infamous infamous is part of the title, infamous Milk Duds Super Duds sweepstakes, with Dr. Doom taking up nearly half of the 2-page spread. The first prize was a trip for 4 to New York, where the winner would get a tour of the Marvel offices and be drawn into that person's favorite Marvel comic, and then they would get 15 copies of said issue to, quote, "bestow upon your family and fraudulent friends," because the text accompanying this ad was written from the perspective of Dr. Doom. I did try finding out who won this contest, but was unable to. So if you have any information about this, you can point me to. I would love to hear that, because what issue, what Marvel comic, who is the person? So I want to know this. And they also did something like this similarly in DC Comics as well. I'm sure that I will get to an issue that has that particular ad, and I'll talk about it there too. The last page of the issue is an ad for the 24-inch tall glittering superhero deco plaque. A wall decoration for the low price of $0.25. I always found it funny that while Spider-Man was featured prominently in this ad, the DC Trinity were in the background, and this is in a Marvel comic book page. So I just always found that funny. I also wanted one of these and never actually saw one. All right, that is Spider-Woman number 9. Moving on to my DC comic from this month, Green Lantern number 111. This is by Alex Savick, penciler, as penciler. Denny O'Neil is the writer. Vince Coletta inks. Adrian Roy colors. Todd Klein letters, with Jack C. Harris as the editor. There is a special thanks to Roger Zelazny for inspiration for this story. In case you don't know, Zelazny was a science fiction fantasy writer and poet, probably best known for his The Chronicles of Amber series, which I have not read. He also wrote Lord of Light, the novel, which was a favorite of Neil Gaiman's that I found out, and because of that, I've been wanting to read it.
Anyway, I don't know exactly what the inspiration was, but it was in the credits, so I wanted to mention that. With a cover, and this is probably why I bought this, a cover by Mike Grell with Tatiana Wood on colors. So the synopsis for this, the story is called Dark Things Cannot Stand the Light, and this came similarly from the DC Database Wiki. Mostly, I had to tweak this one a lot more, because I didn't like the way it was written. So whoever wrote the Marvel synopsis was a better synopsis writer. Yeah, that's probably the right term. Than whoever did this Green Lantern. Apologies if you're listening. Anyway, Green Lantern and Green Arrow stop a couple of crooks from stealing from a fortune teller. Hal thinks he turned one of the thieves into a stone statue and couldn't change him back. They decide to visit the Guardians for help, who inform Green Lantern that a being has stolen the Star Heart, an element trapping in it the universe's mystic energy, and that was also locked in a sun. Green Lantern determines that this might be what caused the ray that turned the crook to stone. A Guardian tells him that because of the outpouring of magic, he and his fellow Guardians are all but helpless. Green Lantern also figures that since his ring would be useless against the mystic energies, they need help from another magical user. Does he call Zatanna? Dr. Fate even? No, the Green Lantern of Earth 2, Alan Scott. After bringing Alan to Oa and explaining the situation, the two Green Lanterns charge the rings simultaneously, saying their respective oaths, and take off to encounter the threat at the farthest boundary of the galaxy. However, the strange being strikes them, leaving them unconscious. When they recover, their target is gone. All right, unlike Spider-Woman, number 9, I kept this issue in my collection this whole time, for 45 years. Though I did buy a better condition copy, again, probably in that time period where I was buying a bunch of those old original issues that I had. But it was a better condition copy for sure. Although I just looked at my original issue 111, and it's not too bad. It's a little faded in the cover. The staples are looking a little rusty, but still good condition. Anyway, I still really like the crowded cover scene by Mike Grell with the antagonist of the issue, with his dual halves of pink and orange behind the dual halves of Alan Scott and Hal Jordan. The cover beckons with Alan declaring, because here we get dialogue on the cover. I love a word balloon on a cover. The danger to the universe is too great. You need help from me, the magical Green Lantern. And both Hal and Ollie's mouths are open in astonishment. It had to have compelled me also in part because magical Green Lantern? Why was he dressed in red and purple? Plus the lower right announced guest starring the original Green Lantern. Original? So this was my first exposure to the DC multiverse, to Earth 2. And in my memory, that this issue wasn't that. It was a later DC Digest having to do with reprinting Earth 2, the original Golden Age stories, but what we, in later times would refer to as Earth 2, after 1956. Anyway, so again, this is a nice little self-discovery. This is my first exposure to the multiverse. Rereading this issue now, I found the partnership of Green Arrow and Green Lantern interesting, even if Ollie does come across a bit overbearing at times. Per Ollie, Hal needs him to remain grounded among the common man. And as a side note, I would learn about the hard-traveling hero story years later. But this is echoing that, I think. As Ollie says, you're with me because I specialize in the little problems, which are often the key to understanding the big ones. Well, guess what happens here? Ollie is completely unfazed when he rides in a protective bubble through a continuum warp to Oa, which, according to this issue, was located at the rim of the galaxy. I had always remembered that Oa was at the center of the universe, so I wonder when that was established. How soon after this story was Oa moved to the center of the universe and not the galaxy. And I assume the galaxy they're talking about in this story is the Milky Way. Anyway, I get the Guardians' explanation about them trapping magic into the heart of a star. I think that's kind of cool, but moments later he says that, quote, against this great outpouring of magic, we are all but helpless, which then, of course, leads to the team up.
that doesn't really make sense since they trapped the mystical energies in the first place. It doesn't make sense. But first, we get our introduction to Alan Scott on Earth 2, stopping some thieves, which was some nice symmetry there. And I got to see his full costume for the first time. And it's even more bizarre than the cover suggested. Red shirt, green pants, purple cape, as shown on the cover, but the underside of the cape is green, and his red boots have these yellow stripes on them to match the yellow of the insignia background on his chest. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge, but I loved it. And I still do. I love the look of Alan Scott Green Lantern. There's just something about it. I also like how his chest insignia is similar to Hal's, but different enough to be distinctive. I know older and later versions of the character had the image of an actual Green Lantern with a handle and everything, but I prefer the simpler geometric design that is shown in this issue. Before they head to confront the thief, they both recharge the rings at the central power battery. Like I said before, each saying their own oath. I would learn later that Alan had used Hal's oath decades before as well. So that was interesting to see. So, because when I read this, it's like, well, they both just say these things, but it turns out that, they reused it. And then Hal is more associated with the in brightest day and blackest night oath. Anyway, Ollie is then, hey, wait for me, guys. You might need a cheering section. So that made me think. So if he's the grounding factor for Hal, shouldn't this galactic adventure show what Hal is to Ollie, besides being a taxi? But I don't, so far in this issue, that's not really the case. There is no symmetry there. To Ollie's credit, however, he does admit to the Green Lanterns that he's spooked, scared even because of where they are. There's just so much nothing out in deep space at the rim of the galaxy. And then, of course, my mind always jumps to when you stare into the abyss. Which is, that's kind of what they're doing. I love how we started this story with a street crime, and now they are at the edge of the galaxy, like I said. And we also got, like I said earlier, we got a peek at another Earth in another dimensional plane, Earth 2. So there's just all this cosmic stuff going on. There's an odd splash page. Well, it's odd for what the reason I'm going to talk about, showing the antagonist attacking the Green Lanterns at the end, with Hal being largely in the forefront, Alan to the left behind him in perspective, and then the thief way in the background with not much visual distinctiveness with him. So they're really playing coy about this villain. In the panels leading up to that reveal, that attack, I should say, he's mostly just shown in outline. There's no detail for this character. So that's why I say it's an odd choice, because I think today we would get a more dramatic reveal of the villain. So that was interesting. This is a 2-part story though. And so this is a great way to provide a cliffhanger ending to get you, to incentivize you to come back next month. And so, spoiler alert, that's exactly what we'll be doing in the next episode, because I did get issue 112 as well. What did the readers of the time have to say about this issue? Well, thanks to both Peter Rios and mutual follower on Mastodon, Nevada, who provided me with the scans of the letters pages about this issue and the next one. DC, and the reason I asked for it on social media and these two responded was that DC, unlike Marvel, does not reproduce the issues letters page in their app. For shame. Anyway, so Tony pointed out that the opening scene between Green Lantern and Green Arrow, quote, seemed more suited to the past when relevance entered the scene. And as I was alluding to earlier, I had a similar thought. That bit read to me more like something from 35 issues prior. But, perhaps it's because, as revealed in the response to Mike's letter, this 2-issue story was supposed to be a Green Lantern special that was canceled due to the DC implosion. That would also explain the 2-page origin reenactment that we see in this issue, and maybe out of some of the out-of-place characterization. But I honestly don't know that. I have to read more issues from before this to really know if this is oddly placed in their timeline, I guess. I also wonder what readers of the time thought about this team up from the perspective of having read the 3 previous issues, which I do have in my collection, with an Alan Scott Green Lantern backup story. Was it too much mystical Green Lantern for 5 issues, or just did it seem like a natural progression to the team up? Spoilers again. There's a little bit of talk about that in the letters page for issue 112. So we'll come back to that. I, for one, will always enjoy more of the original Green Lantern, no matter what. Okay, there are some house ads I want to mention. Before I leave you, there's a house ad for Detective Comics 481, interestingly enough, trying to sell us on the first Detective Comics dollar comic. So I did not realize that was the first one. The middle of the book has an ad telling us to watch next month for details about the second Superman the Movie contest. On the facing page to that ad is another house ad featuring 6 monthly comics: Men of War, DC Comics Presents, Super Friends, Scalp Hunter, Brave and the Bold, and Warlord. As the ad copy states, 20 standard size monthlies, 6 dollar size bi-monthlies, DC, the first and the best. Really trying hard to make up for that DC implosion, I think. And then finally, the back cover was a monogram ad for some Battlestar Galactica models, specifically a Colonial Viper and a Cylon Raider. I so wanted that Viper model. I would eventually get one of the toys that came out, I think, later. The one where they fixed the laser piece from shooting out of the nose because that plastic part was a swallowing hazard for little ones. I hope this is not some sort of Mandela effect. I think there was a toddler or a baby that may have choked and died. I don't know if that's true. From that piece, and that's why they future versions of the Viper would get this piece that would not shoot out. Anyway, so there you go. That is Green Lantern 111. Like I said, I will be doing these. I need to catch up. So as I record this is the beginning of November. So I have October and then later November's to do. And then I'll try to be doing these every month going forward, as well as some other things that I have planned. Let me know what you think about this, especially if you've read any of these comics that I've talked about. I'd love to hear from you. Please email me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or you can leave comments at the blog longboxreview.com. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.